What are some of the significant contributions that Greece has made to the world of wine? How does the Greek volcanic island of Santorini produce wines of stunning depth and freshness at the same time? And how are Greek wines shifting the perspective on what's possible for warm climate wines? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in part 2 of our chat with Konstantinos Lazarakis. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but if you missed it, go back and have a listen after you finish this one. By the end of our conversation, you'll also discover some of the unique and complex terroirs found in Greek wine, the hallmark characteristics of Assyrtiko grapes and how the wine pairs with food, how tasting Moschofilero compares with Assyrtiko. I'm so proud of how I've learned to pronounce those names, but here come some toughies. What you should know about Greece's flagship red grapes, Assyrtiko and Xenonomvro. I've probably mucked those up, but that was my best shot there. The regions that are a must-try in your exploration of Greek wines, how Retsina developed and why Konstantinos thinks it's one of the greatest hopes for the Greek industry, how the country's financial crisis actually helped wine producers, and what are the opportunities and challenges in the future of Greek wines. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my 3rd book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 323. I've had a nasty head cold for a week that I would not wish on anyone. But the upside is that I've had no desire for wine, not least because I couldn't smell it. So it's been an unplanned detox week as I recover from this cold, and my liver anxiously awaits for what's next. On a serious note, I've never slept better, though that could be the cold medicine. So I'm going to try to recalibrate my intake to just 2 glasses of wine 3 evenings a week. I was at 2 to 3 evenings a week. Okay, let's be honest, it was 3. But how about you? Any changes in your wine consumption as you start the new year? Meanwhile, I'm still reviewing my favorite wines on Instagram at Natalie McLean Wine. That's at Natalie McLean Wine on Insta, so connect with me there. Back to today's guest. 2 of you will win copies of Konstantinos' new book, The Wines of Greece. All you have to do is email me and let me know that you'd like to win. I'll choose 2 winners randomly from those who contact me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. In other bookish news, if you're reading the paperback or ebook or listening to the audiobook of my memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drink and Do Much, a national bestseller and one of Amazon's best books of the year, I'd love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemclean.com. I'd be happy to send you beautifully designed, personally signed book plates for the copies you buy or give as gifts. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/323. The paperback usually arrives within a day or 2 of ordering. The ebook and audiobook are instantly available. At the end of today's episode, I'm including part 2 of the bonus interview I did with Matt Cause on his podcast about the issues in the book. We go behind the scenes of the wine world, into its underbelly. This is a digestif, not the wine, for the main meal conversation here today, so feel free to keep listening if you're thirsting for more or not. Okay, on with the show. So Dionysus, of course, the Greek god of wine, embodies both celebration and chaos. How do you see his mythology influencing Greek wine culture today?
Well, that connection, I think, might be to some degree lost in terms of semantics, in terms of hardcore, proper, obvious relevance. But at the same time, as I'm saying, the DNA that created Dionysus still lives on. We were not the first people making wine. Georgians, Mesopotamia got going on that. Hats off. Thank you. We were not the first people, since you mentioned Dionysus, we were not the first people having a god that is related or even dedicated to wine. Egyptians had that before that. Phoenicians had that before that. But we did a lot of things for the first time. The first sommeliers in Ohoi were Greeks. The first wine writers, even someone could argue wine journalists, were Greek.
Oh, who is that?
Well, there are specific names. You can find them. I cannot remember.
Oh, you mean like Heraclitus or something like
Yes,
you're going
yes,
way
yes,
back
yes,
into ancient.
yes.
I was thinking, there's
Yes.
somebody before Hugh Johnson? Yeah.
You are having the Greek symposia, and the whole notion, the whole format of consuming wine was essential in making sure that symposia were evolving into that amazing celebration of the human brain, the human intellect.
Because the symposia was the bringing together of ideas. I don't know what the etymology is of symposia, but yeah, wine was part of it, right?
Yes, and they were doing a very clever thing. They were eating, and that was the first fast part, and then they were relaxing. Then the Inohoi were bringing out the wine, and they started talking. So undisturbed, relaxed. Everyone was supposed to be talking up his mind at that time. Women were not, unfortunately, allowed. So that celebration, that social fabric that had wine really woven into the tightest spots, that's the first time we see this happening in Homo sapiens. Legislation. We had appellations like
You were
4
the first to come
millennia
up
ago.
with the Grand Cru, right, as well?
We were not using the word Grand Cru, but yes, we had cult wines. There is evidence that if you wanted to buy wine from a specific area, you should be looking for specific amphora shape. That appellation was allowed to use only that shape amphora, like the flute bottle in Alsace. All sort of these things. Specific seals on the amphora top. Only specific ports were allowed to have ships going out with this wine. I mean, we would be reaching France in the early 20th century to achieve that degree of sophistication in appellation
and quality
laws.
control as well. So.
Yes, so we have been there before everyone else.
There you go. We're just coming full circle now to understand where we began. So you emphasize the role of terroir in Greek winemaking, that unique combination of soil, climate, and other factors. What's the most extreme or unique terroir that you've encountered in Greece?
Before I go there, because it's a very exciting thing to talk about the Greek terroir, I have to admit that I don't really care about terroir. As I'm saying, I am a lover, infatuatedly loving the Greek genius, the human genius. Well, genius can be everywhere. We're talking about Christian Wax. Even if you throw Christian Wax in the middle of nowhere, in nowhere land, he will be able to make an amazing wine because he is a true genius. He has an amazing brain. That's what fascinates me about wine. I love people. I love clever guys making amazing things. Ibn Sadi, Stephen and Pruhensky. They have great wines,
Australia,
but
yeah.
it's their mind that blows my mind. But going to the Greek terroir, okay, a few things. Wherever you are in Greece, you're close to the sea. But at the same time, we are an extremely mountainous country. We have a lot of mountains. Imagine it's the Balkan Peninsula digging into Mediterranean Sea. Well, actually, it's the other way around. We have Africa pulling up Greece. So the African plaque is pushing towards Europe and Greece is lifted. Go to your nearest map and check the topography, the coastline. Africa is pretty straight. Europe, Mediterranean Europe is crazy because it's being lifted up from the ocean. So we're very mountainous at the same time and very close to the sea in all places. Because of the mountains, we have very little plains. And wine is not essential, I'm afraid to say. So the little plains that we have in Greece are for proper food, although we consider wine being food. So we must have in that little plain that can be cultivated, we must grow our tomatoes, our lettuce, that stuff. Whatever is left, we go for two things, vines and olive groves, because these are cultivations that have very minute capacities in terms of water as well as nutrients.
So they can survive where other crops cannot.
Yes. So that has been the very definition of, Darwinian evolution in terms of terroir in Greece. So we have been pushing our vines into places where vines were supposed to be behaving well. You go in other places, I won't say names, in a lot of New World places that Europeans were going there, they wanted to have a bit of wine and they wanted to have that wine easy. You would never have people going up to Mosul or Mantinea or in even Aminteo in Greece, Mosul is Germany, by making things easy. They were going for the flat places, the fertile plains. So, very little fertile lands, not dedicated to wine, a lot of high altitudes, a lot of different aspects, crazy topography, because Africa lifts us up. We have a lot of earthquakes. You know that from San Andreas Fault in California. All the places that have a lot of earthquakes, that have crazy topographies. Japan, same story. Also, our seas around us have a lot of islands. Islands are becoming more and more important in the Greek wine scene. These islands have shallow seas, so sea behaves a bit differently. So all these permutations create an extremely complicated, crazy place. And the inquiring minds of people that know what they want to do, they superimpose that complexity of place to the complexity of the vitis vinifera genes, and boom, you're having Greek wine.
There you go. Well, let's talk about Santorini, because that's pretty extreme as a specific example. It's an island, it's volcanic. I read this, but how does it happen that they can produce wines of incredible depth, which usually means higher alcohol or some sort of complex layering, and freshness, which is usually reserved for describing light, zesty white wines? I mean, how do those two things come together on Santorini?
We had, in the past few years, a lot of people that studied viticulture in other places around the world. Australia, Davis, Bordeaux. They just go to Santorini, they do a couple of vintages, and then they go out of the rooms, they throw in the fireplace their viticulture handbooks from the university, and they strike a match and just set them ablaze.
Okay, that's
because everything
dramatic. Yeah.
is different. So Santorini, it's a volcanic island, which means that it has a very, very young soil. Just a bit technical. A young soil is very coarse. Clay is the finest particle. So the younger the soil, the less clay it has. Santorini has zero clay, and phylloxera cannot survive.
That devastating root louse that killed all the vines in the 1800s in Europe, yeah.
Yes, so there are places around the world that are phylloxera free. Santorini is phylloxera immune. You can take a pint of these bugs, throw them in the middle of Santorini, and nothing will happen.
Okay.
So the vines are allowed to grow their own roots in that soil, but above ground, it's very windy, extremely hot. So the vines have to kept low on ground to capture that little humidity getting up from the caldera of the volcano, but at the same time being protected from the wind. So people have been using their mind, and maybe out of practicality, maybe out of the need to create something that is beautiful, they started training these vines as baskets. Just Google it, Santorini vine, you'll see these baskets lying on the ground.
They're training them in a basket shape?
Yes, basket shape.
Oh, so are they actually putting physical baskets and the vines circle around, grow around a basket?
No. They form the basket by weaving the canes. It takes a bit of years.
Okay. So they grow circularly. All right.
Yes. So everything that is to the periphery, small shoots and the young bunches are being torn apart by the wind. And then you have only the middle bit that survives.
Wow.
That's why we're having naturally extremely low yields in Santorini. You're having, can I talk like hectoliters per hectare?
Sure.
Hecto is a Greek word, hectoliter is 100 liters. So you go to Grand Cru Burgundy and then they say, we are doing 30 hectoliters per hectare. 30 hectoliters per hectare is 3,000 liters out of a hectare of land. You go in Sauternes and they say, we do 12 hectoliters per hectare, and they're lying. Because Sauternes, you pick only the nobly rotten grapes and you leave the rest for other wines or to be left on the vine. So the vines are producing 50, 60 hectoliters, but they select that berry. In Santorini, you're having 12, 10, 8 hectoliters per hectare. It's bizarre. Extremely low yield. And, this is in Santorini, one of the most beautiful places in the world where the tourism industry goes bonkers. You're not in the middle of nowhere in a place that it's wine or nothing. You are in Santorini. Back to the vines. Every about 40, 30 years, the basket gets too bulky, too difficult to work. It's chopped apart, and a new cane from the old root system starts a new basket. So we have in Santorini a lot of vines where it's a 40-year-old basket above ground, and then the root system is 4 centuries old.
Oh, wow.
4 centuries ago, Bordeaux was a swamp.
Okay.
There was not a single vine in Bordeaux.
They had to dike it all to get rid of the water, yeah.
Yes. So this is Greece, this is Santorini. But what you said about the combination of freshness and high alcohol, we have the extreme wind stress. We have that very old root system supporting a relatively younger above ground physiology. And then we have the glory of Assyrtiko. Assyrtiko is a fantastic grape variety.
And red or white?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, Assyrtiko has gender dysphoria. I'm really convinced about that. Assyrtiko knows it's a black grape variety, but it's a white grape variety. And every moment, every day, looks at the mirror and saying, I am a black grape. And then produces wine. All the people around the world see a white wine and they say, no, you're a white grape. Assyrtiko is one of the few, if any, white grapes that produce wine that can compete with red wines in many of the red wine qualities.
So the depth and complexity. So they're not letting skin contact. That's how they keep it white.
No, it's a white grape. It's a white grape. But this is a grape that manages at the same time to have huge levels of acidity, while, the alcohol in Santorini can be quite high. It can be 14.5%, sometimes lower. But you don't feel it because of the freshness of the minerality. There is very little fruit in Assyrtiko. It's all about minerality.
And acidity, right?
Yes. If you run courses and you want to show your students what minerality is, grab a bottle of Santorini and they will immediately understand the concept. Extreme acidity, huge minerality, a lot of character, a lot of concentration. You get Santorini Assyrtiko in your mouth and the whole broadness is like a red wine. That's why I'm saying that Assyrtiko has that gender dysphoria.
Okay. Wow. And so Santorini, you mentioned the tourism is huge. Greece is a beautiful country. Why is Santorini so popular? It's beautiful, I assume, but is there something unique, or do you have tips on if we visit there?
It's the caldera. It's one of the youngest volcanoes in the world. The view is breathtaking.
And the caldera is the name of the volcano?
A caldera is a geologic term defining that sudden slope that forms around underwater volcanoes. So it's a dramatic cliff and then you overlook the volcano. Every single person has to be at least once in Santorini. I know that by saying that, I'm ruining the sort of future potential of new vineyards in Santorini. But, just see the pictures. Google Santorini.
Yeah, I see the sparkling turquoise blue Mediterranean Sea. It just seems gorgeous. And what would you pair with a Assyrtiko from Santorini? What would be some of your favorite dishes to pair with it?
All right. The short answer is anything that is grilled, seafood, even white meat would go fantastic. The slightly longer answer is that I hate food and wine matching.
Okay. So out with terroir, out with food and wine matching.
I think that food and wine matching overcomplicates an already overcomplicated product, which is wine. I think that the French style of food and wine matching that now all the people around the world think that it's the mantra, first course with this wine, second course with that wine, third course with this wine. I think it's silly and it doesn't create good companies, doesn't create good conversations. In Greece, we put everything in the middle and we share. And there is a reason why in the US you call that family style, because this is the way families eat. All the mammals eat like that. Imagine, the leopards, the families having a kill in the middle and the two generations eating together. It's very essential to share food. So when you're having everything in the middle, at the first time you can have the same dishes and you can have a carnivore, an omnivore, and a vegan sharing the same table. And not sharing the same dishes, but sharing the experience of sharing. So the concept of eating this wine with this food goes out of the window.
Right.
Because you have a bite of some shrimps and then a bite of anchovies and then maybe some grilled cheese and then back to the anchovies because they were really good. So you need things that really quench your thirst and clear your palate. This has been the defining feature of selecting these grape varieties in Greece. We don't want to have this go with that, like Chèvre with Sauvignon Blanc. No. We want exciting, fresh, clean palating wines that would go with a huge range of different dishes. So Assyrtiko have 5-6 different things on the table at the salad. At the same time, like a salad, have some fish, some white meat, and have a bottle of Assyrtiko. You'll be amazed with the versatility. You'll be amazed with the experience, I think.
Well, another one of my favorite white wines is Moschofilero. It's very floral, very expressive. How would you contrast that with Assyrtiko, especially from Santorini?
Okay, Assyrtiko is relatively low intensity on the nose, but very mineral. Moschofilero is very floral and very intense, very rose-petally. Both have excellent acidity. Acidity is a common characteristic of most Greek wine. Think about matching these wines with many different foods and need your palate being refreshed every time you have a sip. But Moschofilero is relatively low in alcohol. We had for lunch Moschofilero that was 11% alcohol, full flavor. I mean, can you remember the days we were drinking wines that were 11.5, 12% alcohol?
I think that was before my time. They've never been that low, other than, maybe a German Riesling, that sort of thing. But then you get the trade-off with the sweetness.
The myth lives on in Greece. We can still get a lot of Greek wines with relatively low levels of alcohol. And we know because the hallmark sign of quality in Greece is only one, the empty bottle. If we sit together to share a few dishes and the bottle is not empty at the end of the evening, no matter the flavors, the complexity, the length, the complexity of texture, or blah, 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 all the things we care to say about wine and quality, doesn't really matter if we cannot get a second glass.
Absolutely. Now, you've already said Greece is very warm. How do they get the low alcohol wines? Are they picking early? Is it canopy, leaf management? Like, how are they managing to keep the alcohol low on Moschofilero?
Right. Two things. The first thing is that we are living in a cool climate dictatorship. It's cool climate, it's good, it's warm climate, it's bad. I'm only drinking cool climate wines and all that stuff. No, warm climates can produce amazing wines. Then they go to Crete and they spend 10 days there, no rain, sun, 35 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure how much is that in Fahrenheit. And they say, oh, good for holidays, summer holidays, but bad for wine. There is no way you can make good wine in these places. No. Greece has a lot of places that are really cold, that might be even colder than specific parts of Loire. And then during all this symbiotic relationship, co-evolution between people that want to enjoy a bit more wine and have different foods and all these different grape varieties, we selected the grapes that can give full flavors at low levels of alcohol. So that has been the outstanding produce of centuries of going back and forth, trial and error on behalf of Greek people making wine and enjoying wine at the same time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then on the red side, what would you say is the flagship red wine or grape in Greece?
Right. Okay. We have Assyrtiko in Nemea that is a charmer.
Can you spell that?
It's Agiortiko. I mean, even I can. It's Assyrtiko.
Assyrtiko. Okay.
Oh, that was a good pronunciation.
Okay, I'm not going to do it again.
So it's Assyrtiko in Nemea, which is in Peloponnese, which is a charmer. Ripe berry fruit, but not overripe, soft velvety tannins, very round palate. I mean, you cannot put the glass down after the first
sip. That sounds like Pinot Noir in a way.
Yes, yeah. For sure. And then you have Xenomavro up in the north. Xenomavro is the Barolo-like, the heavy metal-like a side of Greek wine that might be a bit challenging for the novice drinker because it's high acidity, really high tannin, very grippy tannin. The nose is more tomato and spices and the leather rather than jolly good fruit. But for the people that care, it can be one of the most amazing grape varieties in the world. So these two, I would pick up these two, the charmer and the more intriguer.
Oh, those sound great. So yeah, you've already talked about how old the vines can be, or at least the root system. Are there any other major regions? I know we're condensing this so quickly, but are there other wine regions that you really wanted to highlight, maybe one or two in Greece?
Nausa in northern Greece is the sort of the powerhouse of Xenomavro producers. Grab a Nausa. I can spell that. It's Naoussa.
Okay, Nausa.
Nausa is the powerhouse of Xenomavro. You are having, as I said, Nemea, further down in Peloponnese, many islands. I mean, people say that the islands are the Greek wine next level, 2.0, I would say 15.0. Crete, Tinos, Paros, Cephalonia, all over the place. I mean, again, how much time do you have? Every single place producing wine in Greece has at least one producer that is a must try.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, so beautiful place to visit. I think that's probably the best way to kind of learn about that.
We're waiting for you. Natalie, we're waiting for you.
Thank you for the invite. So, one thing I wanted to cover too was Retsina. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
So it's made with pine resin from the bark of the pine tree. To me, it's always smelt like pine resin. I find it very strong, almost like, dare I say, lemon pledge, like a cleaner. Is it an acquired taste? How did that develop? Why did people want to create this? And is it just an acquired taste?
Okay, what is Retsina? Retsina is like a proper white wine. But when you go through the alcoholic fermentation, you just dip a small dollop of pine resin into the fermentation barrel, vat, whatever, and there you have the Retsina. We started doing this because it was something like a preservative. So when you were having some oxidation kicking in, you cannot really spot it. It's pretty much the same way why a lot of people around the world started doing spicy food. Spicy food, it's a bit more difficult to go astray, to go off. And then if it's a bit off, you can still enjoy it because you're getting more of the spice kick in that.
Okay.
And we enjoy that because of that interplay I said about food and wine. I used to say that Retsina was the longest nail in the coffin of Greek wine. Now I think Retsina is one of the biggest hopes because many Retsinas had a bad name because people were getting lazy and they say, okay, no one could smell the bad wine. Make bad wine and then throw a bit of resin in, a lot of resin, so we can sort them out.
Like some winemakers were using too much oak to cover flaws, so...
Exactly. So nowadays, people craft some amazing Retsinas, fresh, exquisite wines, coupled with carefully selected pine resin. I mean, pine resin can be very different and can be very influential of what you're tasting in your glass. In my mind, Fino Sherry from Jerez and Retsina are twins separated at birth. And the way all these intellectuals crave, praise, drink Fino Sherry, I beg them to try some Retsina and praise and understand what we have been doing for millennia.
Because sherry, the fortified wine from Spain, has a floor yeast thing that settles on it, and it gets a sort of materized or a oxidized taste, oxidized.
Yes.
So yeah, that's interesting. It is, okay, if I can understand it through that lens, because I actually have come to enjoy Fino Sherry. It took me a while, so maybe I'll warm up to Retsina as well.
Retsina's up next.
I meant to ask you about this a little earlier, but I don't want to miss it. So the Greek wine industry faced challenges during the country's major financial crisis. It was around 2007 to 2010-ish. How did it benefit the wine industry, or how did they improve as a result of it?
Necessity is the mother of invention, meaning that back in the 80s, a lot of producers were not having enough wine to sell even in their own vicinity. They have been becoming overly reliant in their national market, if not local market. And overnight, that market has been dealing with huge financial problems. So they said, okay, we have to get out. We have to communicate Greek wine more. We have to make better labels. We have to come up with names that people in other countries or even tourists coming in Greece can pronounce. Stop the plop names that we see in a lot of Greek wine labels. So yes, hard times create great men, and then great men create soft times. But I hope that we're not going to see soft times creating soft men. We'll keep on the hard work, pushing forward, making Greek wine go really ballistically cosmopolitan.
Right. Well, all those soft men just need a hard, tough, strong woman, I think. But so the financial crisis really forced them to modernize labels, improve winemaking techniques. I mean, as you say, it was like adversity, having to deal with that just sort of kickstarted the whole quality revolution in the country.
I think that the winemaking and viticultural part was already there. We were making pretty stunning wines before the financial crisis. The thing that we were neglecting was communicating that quality, especially in a format that would be applicable to other markets than Greece. I think this is where the huge boost took place.
Okay. And are you, I think I know the answer, you're optimistic about the potential and future of Greek wines? What do you see happening 5 years out? 10 years out from now, the discovery of new, you've already said the discovery of new grapes, that sort of thing, but what else do you see on the horizon for Greek wines?
New grape varieties, even newer areas, more young people getting into the wine production part. If I had to bet on something about wine, Greek wine, I would be betting on the increased acceptance of the quality of Greek wine in export markets. I bet that in 5 years, more international wine professionals are going to engulf Greek wine. More sommeliers are going to list Greek wines or more Greek wines. They're going to see that Greek wine has a lot more to offer, maybe not just Santorini. I think the acceptance front would be the new frontier. It would be the sort of increased dimension of Greek wine in 5 years' time from here. I mean, 5 times in one production term is a tiny amount of time. 5 years in wine market terms is more significant. That's why I'm betting on that.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. This has just flown by. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much about Greek wines. Is there anything we haven't covered that you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
Loads of things. We should do that again.
Yes, we'll have to have a part 2 and 3 because I had to cut out a lot of questions because your answers are so vivid and informative. Where can we find you and your book online, Konstantinos?
Académie du Vin is my publisher. They have a fantastic e-shop. Get there. Otherwise, if you Google wspc.gr, which is my wine school, you can order a copy from there. By doing that, you might be having the added benefit of having that signed by me. And if you drop me a line on the social media, like Konstantinos, I just bought the book, that's, to my dear friend Alice or whatever, I can do that for sure.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll put the links in the show notes to your website, Académie du Vin, so people can find you and your wine school and everything else that you do. Konstantinos, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, I've learned so much. It's terrific. We do have to do a part 2 and 3 and 4. So I will say goodbye for now, but this conversation should be continued.
Natalie, it has been my dream being with you on this. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And I hope we converted at least a few of Greek wine apostles.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure you did. All right. Thanks for now, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Konstantinos. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, what are some of the significant contributions that Greece has made to the world of wine? As Konstantinos observes, Greece was not the first to make wine or even the first to have a god dedicated to it, but we did a lot of things for the first time, he says. The first appellations or wine regions, the first sommeliers, wine writers, and even tastings. For the Greek symposia, the whole format of consuming wine was essential to making sure that these gatherings were an amazing celebration of human intellect and the bringing together of ideas. First they ate, then they relaxed, then the inoce or sommeliers brought out the wine, and they talked, undisturbed, in a relaxed and open manner. And in that social fabric, wine was woven into the tightest stitches, no doubt loosening them as they undid their belts or whatever they tied their togas with. Number 2, how does the Greek volcanic island of Santorini produce wines of stunning depth and freshness at the same time? This is paradoxical. Konstantinos explains that because Santorini is a volcanic island, it has young soil that's coarse. So the younger the soil, the less clay it has. Clay is very fine particulate. Santorini has no clay, so the phylloxera cannot survive. The vines grow on their own original roots, but above ground, it's extremely windy, extremely hot. So the vines are trained to keep low to the ground to capture the little humidity that's there and to be protected from the wind. They trained these vines as baskets by weaving the vine canes over years. Everything that is on the outside of the periphery is torn apart by the wind, but then you have the middle that survives. In Santorini, they have low yields of just 8 to 12 hectoliters per hectare, which is a great thing. And every 30 to 40 years, the basket gets too bulky, so it's chopped apart, and a new cane from the old root system starts a new basket. The root system, therefore, is 400 years old. For context, he adds, 4 centuries ago, Bordeaux was a swamp, which is true. They had to dike it, reclaim the land there. And number 3, how are Greek wines shifting the perspective on what's possible for warm climate wines? Konstantinos says that many people believe that a cool climate wine is superior and more complex to a warm climate one. But warm climates can produce amazing wines, agreed. Greece has a lot of places that are cold, even more so than the chilly Loire Valley in France. Over the years, the Greeks have also selected grapes with full flavors, but that produce lower levels of alcohol. In the show notes, you'll find the full transcript of my conversation with Konstantinos, links to his website and books, the video versions of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live, and where you can order my book online now, no matter where you live. If you missed episode 10, go back and take a listen. I chat about wines for seduction, a vine romance for Valentine's Day. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite. The research firm CyberPulse found that 59% of women ages 21 to 39 wish their sweethearts would give them wine, not candy, on Valentine's Day. And London, UK's Sunday Times reported that wine tastings rank above all other venues for finding a date. The reason? Wine means spending time together. In fact, I can't think of an unromantic wine. However, when it comes to choosing the wines to celebrate Valentine's Day, there are certain bottles that hold a special place in my heart. These are delicious wines that I can depend on year after year. And dependability and loyalty count for a lot when it comes to both wine and love. And now here's part 2 of the bonus interview with Matt Caws on his podcast. We explore topics such as how do I distinguish between sexist, sexy, and sexual writing? What are some of the strategies you can use to avoid using wine as a coping mechanism? What trends are emerging related to generational differences in wine consumption? Why is it important for us to vote with our dollars when it comes to producers accused of misconduct? And what are the best wine pairings for different types of chocolate and celebrations? Again, an easy question to ease off the interview. You won't want to miss next week when we chat with Rosemary George, who has authored 14 books on wine, including those about New Zealand, Tuscany, Chablis, Fougères, the Languedoc, and Roussillon. She joins us from her home in London. If you liked this episode or learned even one thing from it, please email or tell a friend about the podcast this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in learning more about Greek wines and expanding their pleasure by discovering them. It's easy to find my podcast. Just tell them to search for Natalie MacLean Wine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, their favorite podcast app, or they can listen to the show on my website at nataliemaclean.com/podcast. Email me if you have a sip tip question or if you'd like to win one of 2 copies of Konstantinos' book, or if you've read mine or are listening to it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Was there anything about Greek wines that surprised you? Have you discovered a Greek wine you love? Email me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. In the show notes, you'll also find a link to take a free online wine and food pairing class with me called the 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix Them Forever at nataliemaclean.com/class. And that's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/323. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week, perhaps a crisp, fresh wine from the Greek island of Santorini.
By the way, I always warn someone ahead of time, if I'm pouring them a glass of Gewürztraminer and they're not used to it, I'm like, just so you know, this is going to be different. I feel you need to give a warning, which is not negative Gewürztraminer. There's lots of good Gewürztraminer, but I feel I have to warn someone versus, say, a slightly oaked Chardonnay.
Right. It is a different experience. Yep.
It really is. It's almost like you have to give a little bit of a PSA. Bouncing to something a little bit more serious, one thing I found of interest is that you see this more where some reviewers are using, especially women writers, are they being forced to say, oh, this is my sassy wine club, and then in some ways that demeans the work, the research, and the time. It makes it less serious. I was wondering your thoughts just on some of the adjectives and verbs that are used.
I mean, this this gets to something, Kara McNeil, the author of the Wine Bible, talked about being professional and serious. She commented on my podcast, Unreserved Wine Talk. She said, professional women who call themselves wine chicks, wine goddesses, wine divas, wine dolls, she doesn't believe you should do that as women because language can marginalize. And I thought, ouch. My signature of my email for a long time was Chief of Wine Happiness. And of course, the title of my book is Wine Witch on Fire. So I asked, but aren't we making wine more accessible with self-deprecating humor, that kind of thing? And her response was very pointed. She said, no, not unless you're already in a position of power. And, it's true. We do not see these sort of same monikers for men. We don't see harvest hunks and wine warlocks and stainless steel studs. And
No, we don't.
I think each person has to find their own way. And if someone is feeling, again, to use a cliche, in their own power, using that language as a woman or as someone else, go for it. But just realize that language has power. Words can marginalize, but I also think words can reclaim power. For me, a wine witch or a witch is a woman who has walked through the dumpster fires of life and come out the other side stronger, wiser, fiercer. I like the word witch, and that's why I use it.
Yeah, it applies. And actually, you use it very well throughout the book. I also would not listen to stainless steel studs because I like a little oak. Or I'm more concrete in my aging. I don't need the stainless steel. By the way, that's such a cheesy wine joke. Sexist versus sexy reviews. I was wondering if you could expand on that. That was one of the things I ticked in the book.
Yeah, so I write about this in detail in Wine Witch on Fire. I do think there is a difference between sexist, sexy, and sensual writing, 3 categories. The first, sexist, I think, subjugates someone as purely a sexual object. And the latter 2, sexy and sensual, talk about personal desire without doing that. And I think the same standards should apply to both men and women and non-binary people, because I think we're actually less comfortable with women expressing their sexuality, which I do in this book. That's why we get the labels of cougar if you're a woman of a certain age and you still express sexual desire. You're a predator, you're a cougar looking for younger men, right? I also had to come around to this in the book as well, that, when I'm joking about the UPS delivery guys and, his phone number is 1-800-UPS pickups or something, and wondering if he wants to come in and taste with me, I'm using a double standard when I don't want my own body sexualized. And that doesn't mean get rid of all humor, but think about the differences between sexist, sexy, and sensual writing. Also, I think when I started talking about men that way, it belied my own insecurity as I was looking for love again, wondering if I could find it after being 20 years off the market. It's a very scary thing to be dating at that time. I'm almost 5'10". So anyway, I needed to embrace my own body as it was and respect others.
And then later trying to deal with zero effort men, which is so funny that
ZEMS, zero effort men. Yeah. If you're ever
which
in
is so
town again,
funny.
look me up. Yeah. It's like, what? Anyway.
When I read that part, I have friends that are single and they tell me all the time. And I had the same thought. I'm like, wow, men are lazy. Like I remember like when I was younger in the 90s, I was like, we weren't lazy. And anyway.
Well, it does key in on something else in the book. I'm trying all the dating apps. And of course, I use an anonymous handle because I was on television at the time, single and happy on one of the dating apps, not Tinder, but I think it was Match.com or something. And I didn't fill out the 75 questions. I didn't even put a profile photo on. But the next day I woke up to like 15 messages in my inbox. He checked you out. So it was like, Hot Rod and Jim 67, all the rest of it. I thought, what on earth do we have in common? I guess we're both lazy in love. We just don't want to work for it.
Oh my God. When I read that part, I turned to my girlfriend, Amy, I'm like, we can't break up because I'm bad enough with
No,
technology.
don't break up. Value what you have.
Oh, hell yeah. All right. So now we're going to bounce to serious. How devastating was that moment when your now ex-husband, basically expressed, I want a divorce? I mean, I can't even imagine how devastating just your entire worldview must have shifted in a moment.
It did. It did. We met in university. We had been together for 20 years. At that time, we had a 14-year-old son. We'd built a life together. My assumption, again, wrong, was that, after 20 years, you settle into contented companionship. You're not going to have the hot, lusty relationship you did at the beginning. But I was wrong about that too. And so that caught me off guard. It was a blend of naivete, but also, again, perfectionism, competitiveness. My mom, who raised me as a single mother, she stayed married about 2 years. So I thought I was, had secret pride that I had lasted 20 years. I had figured it out. I was smart enough to stay together. Wrong. So wrong. You figure, well, I guess it's worked out until it hasn't. So, it just felt like my world crumbling. And so that's why I called the events in this book my no good, terrible, very bad vintage, because it starts off with my husband of 20 years asking for a divorce in January. And then it ends with this online social media mobbing in December. So, and in between, all the rest of life unfolds. So, yeah, it was not a good way to start that year. It loosens your foundations of everything. And then you start, if you're an anxious person like I can be, you think, where am I going to live? What's going to happen to our son? All the things.
Yeah, and then trying to protect your son from it and trying to shield him from that as well. And then, the impact that can have in terms of consumption. And it's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about the idea of drinking too much. I'm going to use you for a second. I'm going to be on the couch and you're going to be the psychiatrist. I find for me, when I drink too much wine, it's always about two things. It's about a love of the wine. It's never about I want to get drunk. It's like, this wine is fascinating and this older vintage. And it's almost this curiosity thing. And then the other side is when you put the bottle away, then the party's over and you got to go to bed. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want the party to end. I'm enjoying whatever that is. So for me, it's always been those two things about why it's like, okay, Matt, you had 2 glasses too many. And I'm wondering just your thoughts.
Absolutely. So it's something that I need to monitor to this day. I didn't mean for Wine Witch on Fire to be a self-help book, but it's turned into that in the way that some people use it and read it, because I have various tips as a wine professional. How did I cut back? But I hear you, Matt, in terms of the first glass of a wonderful glass of wine is so, full of sensual pleasure, and it's lighting up all your dendrites, and it's a full body experience. There's a little touch of the buzz, but there's the smell and maybe you're remembering something where you were before, maybe when you had that wine. It's just a full body experience, which is lovely. And the second glass, then you're loosening your inhibitions and you feel even better. And so there is a natural tendency to say, well, I want more of that. I want more pleasure, more relaxation, more of this sensuality. It's very easy to go down that rabbit hole of drinking too much, as opposed to, most of us who review wines don't have a shooter glass of Pinot and knocking it back. No, we're all about the sensuality, and then we want more of it. So I understand that completely. And that's why, one of my tips in my book is, where I used to pre-drink before we went to a restaurant, which is nonsense. There's no such thing as pre-drinking, it's drinking. I would have a glass of wine to take the edge off because I'm an introvert, but I'd always be a glass ahead of everybody. Now I don't. I love chamomile tea, and I have that before I go out because I find it very calming, because I got to address the issues. And then I have a pre-game plan I'm going to have 2, maximum 3 glasses, and not the 9-ounce ones. But so there's those things that you almost have to think ahead while you have your full faculties, because once you get into it, 3 tastes like 4, 4 tastes like 5, you're gone. So absolutely, I hear you on that. There were other techniques, happy to share, but I totally empathize with where you're at on that.
Yeah, it's funny. I never have been drunk when I've been angry or sad. It's only when I've been joyful, happy, usually in a place of just love, and never been with beer. And I don't like I don't like spirits. It's only with wine. Wine is the only one that does that.
Absolutely. Now, that said, I should say that, when this divorce was unfolding at the beginning of the year, I did start leaning on wine to self-medicate. It was the first time in 14 years of being surrounded by wine that I used it in that way, because it was there. It was available. And it dulled the roar, but not the whimper. And so another thing I have in the book is, what was the thought just before the thought that said, I need a drink? And is it about frustration, sadness, anger, anything like that? And can you just take a 5-second circuit breaker, literally put your hand on your heart, feel your body back as you're all in your head, anxious, and change your energy if you can. Go for a 5-minute walk or whatever works for you, bath, show, whatever.
Your relationship with wine when it comes to your son, about normalizing it with him, not making it a big deal. I think, sometimes in some households, they put almost too much energy on alcohol. I'm wondering how you dealt with it.
Well, I did a very sneaky thing when he was 3, and he said, "What's that?" And it was Mommy's wine, Mommy's little helper. I used to have the LOL memes. And I said, "Do you want to taste?" Because my former husband and I had talked about not making it taboo. So it was a very dry, bone dry, I think it was Cabernet Sauvignon with lots of tannin. Poor thing. And he drank it and went, he spit it out. That's total. Not total, but he just went, yuck. I made sure that I wasn't giving him like an ice wine and having him think, oh, liquid candy. But to this day, he doesn't drink. He is an adult who can drink, and he doesn't. So we've never made it taboo, but he chooses not to. And I've talked to some other wine writers, and their adult children are like that. But it might be just Gen Z as well is drinking less than Gen X. So that could be it too.
Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't even going to go down there. What have you noticed in terms of just the generations when it comes to their habits with wine?
Well, we know that Gen Z is drinking much less than their parents, who tend to be Gen Xers like myself. All the trends of Sober Curious, Sober October, Dry January, Dry July, they're participating in those movements in much greater numbers than Gen X ever did. And I don't know if it's that natural separation from your parents. We're not going to do what they did. I don't know if it's because they have more choices. You think cannabis in different formats, ketamine, adaptogen drinks that can relax, all kinds of things are available to them, mushrooms. So I don't know if it's a confluence of things or economics. Wine tends not to be affordable for younger people. I mean, sure, there's cheaper wines available there, but they have so many more choices. But economically, they're not as well off as we were at their age. They're not going out to dinner as much. They're not experimenting perhaps with wine as much. These are all just hypotheses, so not sure, but I think it's a mixture of those factors.
Yeah, I would imagine all that things is part of that stew. I don't know why I wrote down this line, but maybe it's because I've done the same thing. You say, by glass 3, I was watching Tina Fey videos.
Yes.
What is it about a wine buzz that sends you to your favorite TV shows? I feel Veep and 30 Rock have been watched a lot thanks to Canadian Pinot.
Yeah. And on repeat, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You're feeling so good and joyous, and, alcohol is a relaxant and then a depressant. You just want more of that fun feeling. And, pairing wine and these videos was just some of the most fun I had post-divorce, which is kind of a sad comment. But yeah, absolutely. I just, because, At first, sometimes I would use wine too as a reward for working an hour longer. If I can work an hour longer, I can have a glass of wine. Glass 2, I might still be working. Glass 3, though, I was like, no focus. Let's just turn on the Tina Fey cat videos, whatever. So, yeah.
No, it's true. This one, I remember I was dealing with a couple of years ago, and it was about Norm Hardy.
Ah, yes.
And it was about, do I buy the wines? Because the one side is, everything that, that he did, that he was accused of, that there didn't seem to be a ton of apologies. On the other side, a winery is not just one person. It is the other winemakers, assistant winemakers, administration. It is the grape growers, the grape pickers who come maybe every year to work those lands in Prince Edward County. Like the other day at the LCBO, I saw one of his Pinots. I was 30% off. I'm like, ooh, I mean, I have morality, but that is 30% off for a good vintage. I didn't buy the wine. I myself don't judge someone if they do, but it's one thing I've definitely ping-ponged back and forth from a morality standpoint.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So just for those who may not be familiar with Norman Hardy, quick recap. So despite 21 victims coming forward to report a wide-ranging pattern of unwanted sexual contact, groping, lewd comments, and requests for sex, despite Hardy's own admission that many of the allegations were true, he posted that on his website. He posted it after the Globe and Mail had contacted him twice, if I understand correctly. At first, he denied it, but on the second, when they were going to publication, no charges were ever filed. And according to the Globe and Mail, his victims received no amends. And, as I say in Wine Witch on Fire, I had hoped that Hardy would set up a fund for women in the industry or donate a portion of the proceeds from his wines to a similar cause. And I know that, yes, that would bring more attention to the issue and to what he had done. But I think it also could have been one of the greatest turnaround stories in our industry. Norm Hardy enjoyed a cult-like following in the industry, and using his platform, his leadership on this issue could have prompted so many positive discussions and changes in the industry. So, Matt, on a much larger scale, not equating the two, but Western countries impose economic sanctions on regimes that violate the human rights of their own citizens, even though innocent citizens will suffer. And it's usually impossible, sadly, to separate the two and achieve change. At the time, I contacted the Prince Edward County Wine Council to offer my assistance. They were helping women at Hardy's Winery to find counseling and positions at other wineries. So net, I think we vote with our dollars, and each of us has a choice to make every day. And each choice we make, each purchase we make, is also a vote for who we want to be.
Stanners, Clausen Chase, Rose Hall. I mean, there's tons of great Pinot.
Many more, yeah.
So much
Lots
great
of choice.
Pinot. Yeah. This has been this I think might have been the most serious interview I've done. Before we end,
Sorry for being so down.
No. You're answering all the questions. I'm the one asking them. All right, we'll do some fun stuff. I don't believe you can pair wine with chocolate unless it is port. Can you correct me from this very rigid feeling that I have?
Wow, that's a good way to bookend this. Back to the things that really matter. I agree with you. Port is the best pairing for chocolate. Chocolate, okay, you have to differentiate between types of chocolate. Milk chocolate is toughest because it has the least cacao and the most sugar. That's hardest on wine. Dark chocolate is easier because of that same factor. White chocolate, purists don't think it is chocolate. It has no cacao. It's very sugary. And then you've got chocolate with bridging ingredients like walnuts and I don't know what else is in there these days. Even they've got spicy hot chocolates and probably bacon chocolate. Those are easier to match your bridging ingredient, just as if you had bacon in a salad. Port is always easier. Sweet, the rule of thumb is the wine should be sweeter than the dessert, or the wine will taste bitter by comparison. Port is fortified wine from Portugal. It's got higher alcohol and sugar, so it's going to go best with just about any of those types of chocolate, but of course, dark chocolate would be the easiest one. Then you can get into other, you've got Banyuls, which is south of France, Grenache sweet. You've got Australian Stickies, red Shiraz, sometimes sweet. Ice wine, I think, is really tough unless you're talking about caramel toffee type thing going on with chocolate. Some people get into like a full-bodied dry Amarone, which of course has gone through, the grapes have been desiccated, dried in the mats in Veneto, Italy, and therefore it's more powerful, more alcoholic, and alcohol gives us the perception of sweetness. Those are tough. I would go as far as dark chocolate, really dark, like 80% cacao. I think after that, to each his own. There is a risk of your wine really tasting bitter.
A wine drinker whose favorite wine is Napa Cabernet Sauvignon, and they want to try something different region, different country, different grape, but something that is close. What would Natalie McLean recommend as they go on that journey?
I actually did this segment once on CTV, If This Then That, the way Amazon recommends books. If you like this book, then that one. So look for full-bodied reds. Napa Cabernet, very generous, very juicy. Maybe an Argentine Malbec, that might work. Maybe you want to do a Cabernet from another region like Chile. But we're probably talking New World as opposed to going, you could try Bordeaux just to see the differences, but that's going to be a very different expression of Cabernet and in a blend. So I encourage people to do this when they walk into their liquor store. Find the product consultant or the knowledgeable person and say, look, I like this, but I want to try something different and get their recommendations as well. A Rhone Valley red would be an interesting difference. It's totally different grapes, Syrah usually at a blend. That might be a nice thing to change it up with.
Yeah, if you got the money, Cornas. If you got a little less money, Vaccarat. If you got a little less money than that, find a good Côte de Rhône Village.
Absolutely.
Christmas is coming. What are some of the things that you would tell people to make sure you have available for dinner?
Well, you could buy my book and talk about it over dinner. Just kidding. You could do a book and bottle set.
Oh, I like it. Wine Witch on Fire, available now wherever quality books are sold.
Yes, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, brought to you by all the dismal Ds, but there is humor. This isn't about an angry woman with cats. So, wine-wise, the universal wines, the switch hitter wines that'll please all palates, go with turkey, are Pinot Noir and Riesling. Of course, we do them so well in Canada, not just in Ontario, but BC, Nova Scotia as well. I think those are great to have. I think treat wines, now's the time to splurge if you want. Trend market-wise that's happening that I think is a good thing. Drink less but better. I think you should also have some alcohol-free wines or low-alcohol wines. I am a proponent of them, even though some people regard alcohol-free wines as not wine at all. There are a number of respected producers that make wine with alcohol and now do the same thing with alcohol-free. They're making it all the way to alcohol-based wines, and then they remove the alcohol, which I think is the best way to make alcohol-free wines because they have the taste and so on. Now, if you line them up, you will notice that they don't have alcohol. But if you want to be a responsible host or if you want to pace yourself over the holidays, because it is when we indulge quite a bit, make sure they're on hand.
And last question, how are you doing now?
I'm doing great. This has been a great conversation. Overall, I'm doing well. I don't wish suffering on anyone. I'm a former Catholic, so I always believe suffering is this purifying, make you stronger thing. But having gone through what I went through, I am who I am because of it. And I don't regret that at all. Would I have made different decisions? Absolutely. There are other ways to learn things in life. But I'm at a place now in my career and as a person that I'm pretty content. I have lots of other things to learn. I have lots of things I still want to do, but I can do them now from a place of greater peace, wrestling with my own demons of perfectionism and competitiveness. And I compare them to two snakes that coil. One's a cobra that will squeeze the joy of life out of you. The other is a boa constrictor. No, I got that backwards. That will bite you with its venom of envy. So I'm dealing with those, and I feel like I'm in a good place. Thanks for asking, Matt.
Yeah. What's the website? People want to go find out more about you and they want to find the reviews. Where do they go?
Sure. You can go to nataliemclean.com. You can also go to winewitchonfire.com. That's just going to reroute you over to my website if you're having trouble spelling nataliemclean.com, NATALIEMACLEAN.com or winewitchonfire.com. And on that, you'll find a free reader's guide for the book, which people have been using because it gives you tips on how to organize an informal wine tasting, questions, not just about the book, but how do you feel about your wine consumption, marketing of wine to women versus men. There's all kinds of issues in there that can spark a discussion, not just for book clubs or wine groups, but couples have read it and read the book and then used the guide to talk about the issues between them, or friends or mother-daughter, all the other combos.
Natalie, really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation, wide-ranging, serious, fun, very honest. And again, the book, Wine Witch on Fire, go grab it because it is dense. Just so many different things you tackle. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Matt. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's allowed me this has also been therapy for me, thank you, to sort of consolidate my thoughts even now 1 year out from the book being published. So I appreciate this opportunity. And although the book is dense, it's short, so you can get through it quickly. Just have to add that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I say dense, but yeah, it's not even 300 pages. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Matt Talks Wine and Stuff with Interesting People podcast. Remember, you can find me on iTunes, on Apple, and wherever quality podcasts are sold. Thank you.
Thank you. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.